second monthly meeting of the Hendersonville City Council, May 22nd, 2024. You have the agenda in front of you. Is there anything anyone would like to have changed on the agenda? Or if not, a motion to approve?
Madam Mayor, I move that City Council approve the agenda as presented.
Thank you. Is there any discussion? No? Those in favor of the agenda as presented say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no. Ayes have it, and we do have our agenda. Nothing on the consent agenda, so we will move into presentations, and it will not be necessary to have a presentation and discussion about school resource officers. I'd like to read a statement. The City of Hendersonville is pleased to learn that Henderson County will be funding Hendersonville Police Department school resource officers for the 2024-2025 fiscal year. The City Council appreciates the Board of Commissioners' willingness to listen to the concerns of the faculty, students, and parents of the affected schools within the Hendersonville city limits. The city is committed to working with Henderson County Public Schools, and Henderson County Sheriff's Department to protect our students, teachers, and administration. The Hendersonville Police Department school resource officers serve a critical role in supporting the school students in our city. Their specialized training allows them to deal with a wide range of issues facing our students. We believe that it is important that Hendersonville Police Department officers are in the Hendersonville schools to form critical relationships with our young people. This is the first step in fostering 21st century community policing, and we look forward to continuing our service to these schools. So we're very pleased to see that announcement today. All right, next, Jen H. Who's leading us off here? Okay, Lou.
I'm going to keep this short. On my part, I want to introduce our team. Lorna, if you would join me here. We're fortunate to have a number of the members here in person. I don't know if we'll have a team online too, but we've really enjoyed working with Bolton and Menk and their partner agencies or partner consultants, and want to give them the opportunity to give you all an update of how the process has gone to date, where we are in it, and some of the important next steps we'll be taking over the coming months. So this will highlight areas, and that's your full.
Okay. Mayor, council, staff, and members of the community, thank you for having us here today. Again, my name is Lorna Allen. I'm with Bolton and Mink, the planning firm that is working with you all on your comprehensive plan. With me, I have Ben Hitchings, who is taking my photo with Green Heron Planning, and I have Meg Nealing with Nealing Planning. I believe online, we also have another member of our team, Jen Gregory, with Retail Strategies. So she will be listening in on any related topics. Okay. This afternoon, as Lou mentioned, we will be going over kind of the general content within Gen H, which is the name of the comprehensive and downtown plan. Talk about the context of which the planning area is and the intent of how the plan has come to fruition at this point. We'll be discussing the vision of the future that was developed through input of the community, staff, and members of council. We will be going into a little bit more deeper dive on 5 focus areas throughout the city, as well as touching on some of the components that are within the downtown master plan. Ben will walk you all through the next steps and how this plan will become implemented over its horizon, as well as the next steps for this process of developing the project and having the plan adopted. So on the screen there, we'll very much be spotlighting the plan. The plan will be released to the public on May 31st. This will be the draft plan. Within it, we'll have 6 chapters and various appendices, but for the focus for tonight, I do want to focus on the last 3 chapters, so we can kind of get into the meat of what the plan is about, and would really very much like to have a conversational evening with you all. So if you have any questions or want to raise any topics, we would love to have that conversation tonight as we work through our slide deck. So we started this project back last summer. So we have been working hard since July. Staff has hosted countless opportunities for the community to engage in the project, leading pop-ups and open houses, as well as stakeholder discussions, interviews. There was some on-the-ground canvassing that was done, as well as a community advisory committee. Also, throughout this process, staff was able to get the Gen H plan in front of many boards and committees so that we had opportunities to hear from special interest groups. All in all, the Gen H plan was developed over 4 phases. The first phase was really getting into the issues and opportunities within the community, and a lot of that front-end engagement informed that, as well as data that we received from the city and the county, and then just analyzing that with best practices. Then we dove into phase 2, which was kind of developing this vision and goals and that growth framework. Phase 3 was really working with staff very closely, as well as the Community Advisory Committee, to identify those implementation steps and those priorities within them, short and longer term. And then phase 4 is really what we're starting tonight, is moving towards that adoption process. So we'll get more into that moving on. And now I'm going to hand it over to Meg, and she's going to get into the context with how we started the plan and developed it.
All right. Good afternoon, Mayor, members of council, and staff, and members of the community. It's nice to have time with you this afternoon so that we can go through some of these details that are showing up on the pages of this plan. I want to spend a little bit of time talking about some of the things that you're going to see in Chapter 4, which is a pretty critical piece of the puzzle, if you will. In this section, we have some information that we hope that you will see the value of it as a resource as you make decisions over a number of years going forward. And as you face different kinds of things, large and small, being able to turn to this part of the plan and refer to it to get some ideas, some suggestions for how you might think about something, knowing that it is a reflection of what we've heard through the process, a reflection of some of the things that we heard from the community, and how that has been woven into some of the data that we have been dealing with through the process, and also some of the ideas that have emerged and been tested at some of the community meetings. So at the beginning of the process, or towards the beginning, we posed a few questions that we thought were important to answer as we go into thinking about what is this future land use map and all the supporting information that goes with it. So a little bit of this, I wanted to point it out because it's on the pages of the document in Chapter 4, but it's a bit of a repeat of some of the things that we were discussing early on. How much growth came up as one of those questions? And you know from your experience here in the community, you've seen a lot of change. You've seen folks being interested in moving to Hendersonville. You experienced a real spike like a lot of communities, destination communities like this in 2020, when everybody realized that they could pick up and move to a place that they really wanted to be with a high quality of life. And so that's that tall bar you're seeing in that upper chart. So we explored some of that through the process and had a few what ifs, on the low end, what if we just keep getting what we've had at the densities that we've had, and weaving in the projections from the Office of State Budget and Management. How did that, what did that suggest in the way of housing units? So at the very low end, in an earlier presentation, we mentioned about 2,200 is the minimum that you would expect. So we do that as a starting point to understand really how much land at a minimum are we looking for. And through the process, we have pulled in a bit more data. The high end of the spectrum here, the details are on the pages, but the high end of the spectrum is saying, well, what if everybody really wants to be in this type of setting, so the county growth that's projected all lands within Hendersonville. So we put that out there as well for a high end. So I wanted to point that out to you so that is reference material within this chapter. We also asked the question of where should new growth and new development go? And so that was that question about what we call land supply. It's a combination of what's vacant inside the city limits in your ETJ, as well as land that is really ripe for redevelopment. So we know that we've got some aging structures, some fairly large parcels that some of them sit on, and there are higher and better uses for those parcels. So through our analysis, we identified those and put that into the set of information, and we are approaching 4,000 acres within your existing land area, including the ETJ, where development could go. So keep that in mind when we talk about the map that's coming up. We also asked the question, what kind of development should be supported? So we listened to the community about the kinds of things that they like already in the community and like to see more of. And also some things that aren't present in Hendersonville that they'd like to see in the future. And so in the plan, we have a short list of some of those uses that really got a lot of the feedback through our survey and other mechanisms about what people would like to see. But we balance that against the data that we have, what kinds of things the community can support, the land can support in Hendersonville, as well as what's the market doing. So Jen, who's joined us by phone, has done some digging into that. So that's some of the information that's in here. But those are important pieces to bring together. So it's not just where is growth going to go, but can we actually put these uses on the ground that the community says they would like to see? And is it something that wants to be in Hendersonville anyway? We also ask about the appropriate level of intensity. And we do that because when we think about our growth patterns, there are always choices with that. And so one of those choices is to have a pattern of development. We like to talk about it in terms of spreading peanut butter across the landscape like a piece of bread. But one of the things that the reason we see that in some of our communities is because that's the path of least resistance. It is the easiest and sometimes cheapest way to develop in a community, but long-term, the operations and maintenance of the infrastructure to support that isn't so inexpensive. So we asked the question of how can we take advantage of the infrastructure that we have and the land we have available in our current jurisdiction and reduce that pressure for development in the outer areas, especially going into areas beyond the ETJ. So in the plan, we give a little bit of that information, which was also presented at one of the community meetings. And the analogy we use there is about the idea of being deliberate about your growth pattern. So we think this is setting you up for that. But the idea is when you're intentional, sort of like with an orchard, an apple orchard, if selective pruning leads to a much more vigorous growth of the trees, the orchards that you actually have, and a really productive and vibrant orchard, it's not unlike what you'd be doing with making choices about the utilization of the land within your inner areas and taking advantage of that property and the infrastructure that's available. So that's in there to also set the stage for there are places within your community where you can have different intensities and really maximize these assets that you have. We also took a step to answer the question of, well, at what point, if we have a certain amount of housing coming to Hendersonville, and we looked at those ranges, at what point would you need to step outside of the city limits and outside of the ETJ looking for land to accommodate future growth? So staying with your current household size, this chart is something you can study, but the point of it is the middle bar that's orange represents your current intensity of development when it comes to residential. The two bars on either side suggest that you would be out in that outer area, out in the landscape of your county area, really, once you get close to 7,000 units. So when you're approaching that point, that's when the demand for land will increase on the outside. If there's an appetite for those higher intensities, which is assumed through this process that you have pockets of that you can actually go a lot further, accommodating a wide variety of housing at different intensities inside your city limits and ETJ, and not put that pressure in those outer areas, which really speaks to maintaining your resources, not sending our infrastructure in all directions, which also has a cost over the long term. So that's in there to help sort of set the stage for why we've got diversity in the map. The vision map that you're about to see has a lot of those kinds of different types of areas where a wider variety of uses at higher intensities can be supported. So that brings me to the vision for the future. So that's really the chapter 4 portion of this that you all will use as a resource. Within it, you have some pieces to it that will hopefully serve you for the next 10 to 20 years. Those being a vision statement, that's sort of that all-encompassing big picture. Where do we expect to be? What do we expect to say about ourselves 20 years from now that should be true if we implement this plan? Along with that are some goals and objectives. Those are highlighted here, and those are the goals that have come through the process and been tweaked and refined along the way. But we use those as guideposts to develop the plan, but we fully expect that this is something that all of you can go back to with the objectives that support them to make some decisions about circumstances that maybe were not part of this process or are not present today in Hendersonville. So that's a key piece of this chapter 4 that we hope you guys can use as a resource in all decision making. The other piece we have in here is the guiding principles. So this gets at some concepts that are true and reflected in the vision map that has come through this process that's on the next slide. But the important piece about this is just some principles. There are 7 of them that you see listed on the left-hand side, and within each of them is an explanation of what it is and why it's important. We also give you something like a did you know? That's sort of a fun fact of helps you understand why something like that's important. So that's in there. We also brought into this section some of the public input that we received through the public meetings or the surveys to be able to align that with some of the guiding principle content. And then finally, we give an opportunity. So in this case, we're featuring the compact development guiding principle. So the idea that you actually are taking advantage of some of these places in the city and creating these mixed use environments that are walkable and bikeable. And in this, there's an opportunity for infill development within your city. And so here the opportunity is the context sensitive infill development. So it touches on what that is, and that should be a piece of what you're considering when you see those types of proposals within your city limits especially. So that brings me to the vision map. Most people turn to this for all of the answers when they think about their plan for the future. This is kind of that centerpiece that everybody looks to for the answers, but it is that graphic depiction of all the information that precedes it. So those ideas and the goals and objectives and the guiding principles are supported by a graphic depiction. Here you see 4 categories of character areas. So it's the open space, it's the areas for living, it's the activity centers, and it's the areas for employment. So within each of those are a variety of character areas that are displayed on this map. And if you compare this back to that intensity conversation, you'll see that those pink nodes generally represent those places where you do have those opportunities for intensity, flanked by some of that residential that could include a wide variety of housing types, and being sensitive as you go out towards the outer edges to where you can conserve a great deal of open space. But also you have that opportunity internally with it, what we call a green spine. So that's just generally speaking what's showing up on this vision map. Those character areas are all showing up in the legend on the lower left side. But here within this chapter, we also give you a breakdown of how much land area is devoted to each of those character areas. The pages that follow describe in more detail what these character areas are. They are written to give you the intent of each of these areas, what you expect to see in the range of uses, generally the scale, generally the circulation pattern, and the complementary open space. It is the amount of detail required to give guidance to any changes to your local land development regulations going forward, i.e. zoning. But it's that kind of intent that paints that picture. So when people see a color on a map, they can go to this piece and see what is intended for that piece. The other thing we do strictly for guidance, but just to kind of give you a sense and underscore the fact that these character areas are not zoning, what you will find is that there's probably more than one zoning category you have today that would be applicable and appropriate in one or more character areas. So there's naturally overlap, there are definitely some opportunities. So when you have a proposal in front of you, you can see that, yes, somebody may be requesting a certain type of zoning, and when you see where their site is in the future land use map, it's probably one of a few options that they have available to them. So, and as your code changes over time, this is something that would not necessarily get updated. It just makes that point about the connection between character areas and zoning. It's not a direct one-to-one relationship. So I'm going to stop here for a second with a little bit of a breather, just to underscore the importance of this chapter. It actually is going to serve as a resource for you for a wide variety of decisions. I think that what you are most accustomed to are the like zoning requests and having to do the consistency statements, right? So when you're looking at your plan and looking at the future land use map and deciding whether or not the policies there, everything that's being proposed in the rezoning application, does it fit with the plan in terms of that map and the supporting policies? But we also think that there are some other opportunities for you. So there may be some things that come up that may be related to a public investment. So you may have a capital improvement that you're considering. How do you go to this chapter and decide what parts of it are you going to use? How is it going to inform your decisions? So I'll stop and see if anybody has an answer before I give it to you. Having seen the goals, the objectives, the guiding principles, the map, and so on, what would you go to make a decision about funding something that, now I will preface this by saying you do have the criteria for prioritizing projects, but something like this in Chapter 4 can complement your decision-making process to see what kinds of things might be in alignment. Any thoughts about that or questions about that? Clear? Okay. We also think it's one of those things that it's, as you are faced with maybe some initiatives. So let's just say somebody comes forward and has an idea about a grant, and City Council would have to approve it because there's a match to it that City Council would have to support. Or there's an initiative to extend your sidewalk or trail system, and the plan doesn't specifically address it. Any thoughts about what you've seen in Chapter 4 that you think would be helpful to you beyond the map itself, which may or may not answer your question?
I mean, I think the fact that there are character areas that have been identified would just be something that we could lean on for many different subset categories like that.
Yep. And what about the goals and objectives? Did you see anything in those that would help you decide whether or not that's something the City Council should get behind?
I mean, ideally, it would hit some of those goals and objectives. Otherwise, we probably shouldn't be considering it.
Exactly. Exactly. So there may be things that you're faced with that are competing projects, or there may be things that it's just competition for a limited amount of resources that the city has, right? And so as you move forward, every time you're faced with something like that, this is the chapter we think you can go to for that guidance. Find that rationale, find that foundation for your decisions. We also think that over 10 to 20 years, you're going to have circumstances that will come up that just were not even anticipated at this point in time. And so how do you use that when the map doesn't answer all of those questions? So we think it's been put together in a way that is a useful document for all of you in your decision making, but it goes well beyond that. So all of your boards can be referring to it, staff, and of course your partners in the community. So different agencies that you're collaborating with. This can be an opportunity for getting everybody on the same page. So everybody's singing from the same hymnal, so to speak. So we hope this will serve you well with that level of detail in this chapter. And it's more than just the map that's within there. Any questions about that before I move on to the focus areas? Is this the presentation hard copy? Okay. Okay.
Meg, while they're catching up, just a question on the percentage of character areas. About 60% or so is residential for this plan. How does that compare to other communities?
In terms of land area, that's pretty common. I mean, one of the things that you all have to look forward to is that, and Jen could chime in on this, but you are getting that demand for residential, right? And what we've heard through this process is there is an appetite for a wider variety. Because the reasons are people's lifestyles, the price points that they're looking for, those kinds of things. So that's a real plus. You've got a lot of land within your city and your ETJ to accommodate a lot of housing. And as Jen will point out, with the way things are changing and how people work remotely, how people are shopping online and so on, the proximity of this housing to areas that are actually devoted to commercial uses, office, employment, and so on, that actually helps get people closer to where they may be working, or if they do shop, not online, or they're seeking dining and entertainment opportunities, it puts them closer. So we expect to see a little bit of that rise in that we don't need so much land area for the other uses going forward. And we also are seeing quite a bit in our underutilized land that your commercial areas and your employment uses can fit in. We'll also note that where you do see those types of non-residential clusters or mixed-use clusters on the map, they are taking advantage of places where you already have some of that synergy, but giving you the opportunity to bolster those and have residential not far away. So presently, you've got a lot of options for commercial, which starts to devalue everything that is in those categories. By tightening that up and having smaller geographies, you have more opportunity to maintain and increase the value of those properties in those nodes. Does that get at your question?
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Okay. All right.
Mayor Vogt, members of the city council, it's John Connon. Just want to point out too, when you're looking at the draft land use map, we were very careful to try to identify certain areas for employment centers. We talk a lot about residential and commercial, but also wanted to identify some areas that may be prime for, higher end, mixed use or employment opportunities as it relates to clean industry, things that will support our citizens from job creation as well as tax base. You can see that particularly on the toward the bottom of the map around Upward Road and in that area. So we wanted to include some of those areas, but we were very conscious about how that may encroach in the residential area. So just may want to look at that and get your feedback at some point in the future.
Just adding on to the manager's comments there, the idea that some of these employment areas have that mixed-use component as well. So the way those have been described, we want you to be competitive in the long run too, with the idea that some uses that are mixed in are complementary and supporting, so that you can really attract the tenants that would want to be in those environments. Okay, so we will move to the focus areas, which are also part of this. And the reason we do this, they are conceptual illustrations, and we think it helps people better understand some of the details that they're reading in the character areas and seeing depicted on the maps. And so by picking out a few areas, we're able to illustrate some places that, if you're adhering to the plan, what development might look like. Now, what we've illustrated is probably one of 100 or so options that are all in keeping with that, with the character areas that are described for each site. But we want to do that just to give people a better sense of how do these pieces fit together. When you say infill development, when you say new commercial development, what does that look like and how does it relate to its surroundings? So there are 5 total. I'll take you through 3, and 4 and 5 are part of the downtown master plan portion of the plan. So Lorna will walk you through those. But the first 3, Western Acosta Trail, is one of our opportunities for an emerging neighborhood center. So that's one of our character areas, but it's also an opportunity to demonstrate how infill development can happen in a way that is context sensitive, starting to look at the surroundings and looking at the housing that is nearby and finding those places for different types of housing units and even some housing units that are like their surroundings to be woven into that fabric. We also see some opportunities with some of the land we identified as underutilized, that over time, maybe it transitions, like along Canuga, to some uses that would accommodate both residential and non-residential uses, perhaps even in a vertically mixed-use condition at a small scale. The most important feature of this illustration is the idea of trail-oriented development. So with the trail coming forward, you have a lot of opportunity to do exactly that, to have development relate to that trail. It makes it a safer place, ensures the utilization of a facility like that, but also because of that orientation and relationship to development, it actually becomes more than a recreation feature and really can function as a transportation element within your network. So that's one of the things that we've illustrated here to show how some of that might emerge within that area. Open space is an important piece of it. So you see a green space illustrated there as part of that destination, which could be programmed, but it's also signifying to the users of the trail system that they've arrived in one of those points of interest along the way. And it starts to create some of that value for some of the development that would be facing and flanking that green space. Another one is the Blue Ridge Mall focus area. So we looked at this one because we see across the United States how malls are being redeveloped and reused. Here, we're suggesting that there is a transformation of the mall site as well as the adjacent shopping center, and it transitions back to the existing residential. The details of this concept suggest that residential is a significant component of this, particularly as you get closer to the neighborhoods and the scale drops down in size to be more respectful of the adjacent existing neighborhoods. But as you're out towards Four Seasons Boulevard, some of the other things that you'll see there is the idea of the introduction of some mixed-use development that would have some of that retail, which would be viable with so much in the way of residential around that. Office and entertainment could be some of those uses as well, but that integration of those uses there could be something that is phased in over time. Somebody's working on the idea of how that mall site transforms. It's not something that happens overnight and can be phased. I will point out that none of these changes in any of these illustrations happen unless the property owner wants to do it, but it sets the stage for what that possibility is and what's being conveyed by the character areas. Some of the expectations you should have around development when you see proposals are described in some of the supporting information, like the connected road network that you see there. So we know we have a lot of traffic on Four Seasons Boulevard. The idea of a parallel network and a connected network within that, and the points of access being at a few key points helps a lot with how traffic is managed on Four Seasons as well as internal to the site. And then the third of these 5 areas is the Spartanburg Highway Focus Area. So this is your typical suburban commercial corridor. We're seeing a lot of properties that are declining in their value and declining in their lease rates. There's a lot of vacancy also in this corridor. We think this is an area that through redevelopment and what the character areas suggest is that the reinvestment can take advantage of the available property here. It's a place where you can have a concentration of some both local and more community serving non-residential retail uses, dining opportunities. But this is also a place where you can introduce a wider variety of housing units. So this is where you might find some more apartment options, townhouse options, things like that. But again, that sensitivity means you're scaling as you go towards the existing neighborhoods that lie north and south in this picture, but really east and west of this corridor. So the other things that we're also seeing is that with the transition of, for example, the car dealerships, how people are buying cars today, we also think that that could influence how the property owners in this corridor might want to transition their properties and be in keeping with how the car sales are being done. So it requires a lot less square footage, and it requires a lot less fields of car parking for displays and those kinds of things. So that's some of what you'll find in this. The most important thing is the takeaways of what are the features that as you're faced with proposals, you should be looking to think of them as design concepts or design principles that you'd like to see exhibited in some of the things that might come forward as proposals. And with that, I'll hand it back to Lorna to move into the last two.
Okay, all right, I'm going to take y'all downtown, and we're going to get into the downtown master plan. And really, just to preface the downtown plan, it's really just a deeper dive into this area, a little bit more so than the focus areas did. So we will get into some guidelines for how development, redevelopment should occur in downtown. But as we get started, I do want to point out that in this process, we heard over and over again resoundingly that the character of downtown is the character of Hendersonville. So with that, we really wanted to be sensitive to downtown, knowing that there are some unique characters within downtown. So firstly, the lime green to the bottom of the plan on the page is what staff came up with the term as the lower trailhead district. So this is the area where we already have some big box retailers, kind of a mix of uses, but we're also thinking through how the alignment of the Acoustic Trail may influence that area in the years to come. So that's kind of like an emerging South Downtown area. And then moving up, the purple area is really the heart, the core of downtown. That is your Main Street district. And then surrounding it is what we're calling Downtown Edge. Downtown Edge is kind of where we see the most potential for opportunities to infill housing, which will support the businesses on Main Street, but also the other businesses throughout downtown. So we've kind of thought a little bit about what that should look like moving forward as maybe land uses change, parking lots change into places, those types of things. And then finally is the 7th Avenue district. And, you know, we had a really, Meg in particular had a really great opportunity to meet with some of the leaders that live in and around the neighborhoods there. And really kind of also with the Downtown Advisory Board, like learn a little bit more about what is so special and unique about that district in regards to its history, but also thinking through how to be sensitive to the existing neighborhoods that are there. And how to think strategically about if there should be infill, what that should look like, how the form it should take, and so forth. Additionally, I will point out that within downtown, the hatched piece is this building height overlay character district that in 2007, the North Carolina State bill applies to kind of how tall you can get in that area, which is 64 feet. So that overlay touches all 4 of these character districts. So that is taken into account as we kind of think through some of these guidelines. Each of the downtown character districts do have kind of a description of what their character is and what's special and unique about it, and then where the opportunities lie. And I kind of mentioned a few of them already, you know, connecting to the trail systems, making network connections within your streets, thinking through better pedestrian and bike facilities, public spaces, open spaces, opportunities for smaller plazas, parklets, that type of thing, as well as thinking through housing and local businesses as it relates to each of the districts. So similar to the focus areas, we did come up with a concept, and as Meg put it very well, this could go one of 100 ways, but just to kind of illustrate how downtown could evolve, or the Downtown Edge character district could evolve over the years with where there are properties that are underutilized today, could see redevelopment. Really looking for opportunities here to introduce more rooftops, which will support jobs and businesses and economic growth in downtown. Also looking for opportunities to repurpose property to look for opportunities for affordable housing. So I know you all are kicking off, looking at your affordable housing strategy for the city. So thinking through where those opportunities might lie, as well as other connections for your street network, so you get that redundancy built in, and connecting to the Acosta Trail. So these are kind of some of the unique things that I want to point out with the downtown edge area. And then moving into 7th Avenue, really thinking through our strategy here was thinking about the existing urban fabric, the buildings that are already existing there, the neighborhoods that are already existing there, and thinking very, I'll say surgically, when we look at the neighborhoods and thinking about what infill looks like. So really only recommending new infill in vacant lots and places where there aren't structures currently, talking about affordable housing strategies and programs and policies to support neighbors that are there currently. And then along 7th Avenue, looking for opportunities for higher and better uses of some of the properties that are there today. So it's just showing kind of different building and land uses in this area. And probably most importantly is connecting that Oklawaha Trail to 7th Avenue with the new streetscape and bringing that connection through to Main Street, so you get this really great pedestrian experience. And so you don't have that kind of feeling of 7th Avenue's over here and Main Street's over here, but it really starts to tie together nicely the entire downtown. And earlier I did briefly mention downtown design guidelines. These are really to set you all up and staff up with success as you get new proposals that come forward about how new projects should look and feel. So the guidelines are really divided into 3 categories. First being the public realm, and essentially that's everything really outside of a building that you touch and interact with, from your streets to your sidewalks to your public spaces, and helping organize kind of some strategies and guidelines around the public realm. Next would be site design, so how buildings should sit within a site, how they should connect to the street, where driveways should occur, where parking should occur. So that really kind of affects how they interact with the public realm. And then thirdly is building design. And so setting some guidelines for building articulation, so how often you should have windows, how often you should change materials so you get a varied architectural experience versus just kind of a monolithic architectural design. So those are the 3 categories for the design guidelines. And we do get into quite a bit more detail with these 3 categories and kind of outlining all the variables and elements that you can find like within the public realm, whether it be street crossings or outdoor dining, how cars should park on the street. So getting into those more specific recommendations as it relates to the public realm. And then with site design, really getting into a lot of the details when you're laying out that site, thinking through how height affects the surrounding uses. So thinking through where we would want to see step downs or step backs, and how setbacks affect kind of the surrounding uses. So there we have sensitivities from when you're changing from one district to another, that you're not going to have a super tall building next to a historic residential district. So you're thinking through what those changes look like. So additionally, you can kind of see to the map on the right-hand side that these are broken down into different height categories, predominantly the 64-foot height, which is your already existing overlay, and then the 40-foot height to the 7th Street district area, and then down into the lower trailhead area. And then lastly is that building design, and I touched on kind of the facade articulation, but also the massing, how often open spaces should be articulated and where they should go. And so this is really kind of broken down by the character of each of the districts, so kind of touching on some of the unique aspects of it. I think, when you're in the downtown Main Street area, a lot of flat rooftops, there's, 2 to 3 story buildings, that kind of thing, versus when Lower Trailhead has a very different character today with, parking lots and retailers and so forth. So starting to think through some of the characters that is existing that we want to move forward versus some of the changes that we'd want to see happen to get a more compatible urban form. So I'm going to pass this off to Ben, and I promise we're almost there.
I just have a question, I'm sorry. So building and design guidelines were present in the character areas. Are they highlighted in the focus areas as well?
No, part of our scope was to dive deeper in the downtown, so that's why there are guidelines within the downtown, but not necessarily within the focus areas outside of downtown.
But we, as council, could decide if that was a priority for,
Absolutely, that could be a next step following this plan.
okay.
And are there any questions?
I have a question for you.
Yes, ma'am.
A concern. On 7th Avenue.
Yes, ma'am.
Explain this to me, where you says that this elected area is posed for reinvestment, however, will require strategies to mitigate displacement
Correct.
and direct future investment.
Correct. So we've added that, sure. So we've added that note in there, knowing that you all are going through an affordable housing strategy. So we're a little ahead of that practice. So we wanted to make sure that we had a bridge between that process and this plan, which we don't have policies to direct within this plan for that, but noting that it's important specifically within the 7th Avenue area. And I don't know, Ben, when we get into the implementation piece, if you want to touch a little bit more on that.
So that means that the individuals that are living there, it won't interfere with their lifestyle. They won't be displaced as it has been years before. That's my concern.
Right.
This will not have effect on the individuals that's living in that area.
So the plan that is drawn is a concept only, and we only drew on underutilized properties, commercial properties, and only drew on vacant residential properties. So as far as strategies and policies that you all can put in place to assist with anti-displacement, that would be a next step with your affordable housing strategy.
Which displacement's already come up a couple of times, and I actually wrote it when we got to this one about how we were gonna have more displacement concerns once we start talking about developing in different areas. So I think that this is a good reminder that might seem like something we don't have to talk about a lot right now, but I think as we move forward, we're gonna have to talk about it more.
Yeah, we just wanted to make sure that it was noted in this plan, so you all had something to kind of point to and say, hey, it's in the plan, we need to bring this forward.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Great. I'm Ben Hitchings, wrapping up for the team. Councilmember Lawrence, the displacement issue that you raised is something that was a real concern that we worked as a consulting team working with staff to really try and think through. And so we've got some implementation strategies to help prevent the displacement of residents. In the same way, Councilmember Hensley, we have some strategies for thinking about design guidelines outside the downtown as well. So both of those items are things that have been incorporated into our portfolio of implementation measures. So when we thinking about where we are in the planning process, we have gone through months of public engagement, lots of analysis, incredible work with the consulting team, working closely with staff and the community. All of this is an underutilized opportunity if we can't figure out how to then move effectively from planning to implementation. And so we have a particular approach that we use to really strengthen that link between the planning process and actually beginning to realize the updated community vision on the ground here in Hendersonville. And so we've got 3 elements to the implementation approach in order to make this tight linkage. First, we have an overall implementation strategy. It flows from some of the big ideas that you may have seen at the community workshops and engagements that we've had with y'all. We also then have a portfolio of implementation projects that we've worked closely with staff to develop, flowing from the vision, the goals and objectives of the plan. And then finally, we've got some operational policies, important things to keep in mind moving forward to help really make sure that we provide the resources and support to implement the plan effectively. So let's take a look at the implementation strategy. We've got Meg and Lorna's map underneath, and we've got 7 big ideas that represent the key things that we're trying to do through the plan. We're trying to connect people as we implement the plan. We're trying to connect people with the great outdoors. We're trying to protect and restore natural systems in and around the community. We're trying to energize a multi-pronged approach to developing and providing more affordable housing and more access and more accessible housing. We're trying to strengthen the placemaking, the identity of our neighborhoods and different places throughout the community. We're trying to catalyze small business and innovation. We heard how important that is for folks in the community to have locally grown businesses that reflect in the community with people from the community providing services and goods to the community. We also heard a lot about trying to work collaboratively and support others in protecting apple country. And so we have the city has a role in that, but it can't happen without the leadership of others who care about that as well. And then finally, we have a wonderful opportunity to transform gateways and corridors into and out of the community. So those are the key things that we're trying to do. And so the spectrum of different individual implementation projects help to advance those. In addition, each of the implementation projects that we'll talk about supports one of those, at least one, if not several, of those 10 goals that Meg showed. So we've got overarching goals, we've got an implementation strategy, and then we've got the place where the rubber hits the road. That is these individual projects that either build something or create updated standards or secure the funding to make a public investment. And so here in North Carolina, we've got a toolbox that supports our different implementation efforts. And there are really 4 different kinds of tools in the toolbox. One is ordinances. So our ability to create rules for how new development can occur in the community, for example. Secondly, we know that y'all are making decisions on how to invest public dollars to improve the community. So that is can really have a tremendous impact on advancing the work of the plan. There are also programs and policies that you might develop. You might establish a new appointed board, or you might start a community beautification committee, or you might work with a partner to try and catalyze a new nonprofit that serves the community in a particular way. And then finally, there are lots of things that we study when we do a comprehensive plan, but sometimes there are things that require even more attention and focus in order to develop a shared pathway forward. So sometimes we also have additional studies and focused plans that are part of our implementation strategy to learn more about an area, develop a vision for it more specifically, and then work to advance that vision. So all of the implementation projects that you see will fall into one of these 4 buckets. So in your plan, so we're in chapter 6 now of your plan. And so we worked collectively, drawing from all the public input that we received to develop a set of promising strategies and implementation measures. And then we went through a special process with upper management and the project team to vet each of the different ideas. And some of the ideas that we thought, well, might be a useful idea, were ones that didn't make sense, including in the implementation portfolio. And then others we added. And so we really thought through this compendium of different strategies. Again, in your plan, you will see that all these different implementation projects are organized under the 10 goals. Altogether, we have 76 different implementation projects. That is years of work, if not decades of work by your hardworking staff. So just know that you can't just flip a switch with this work and have your wonderful updated vision be fully realized. It takes years of dedicated work to make that happen. So if you are a community member and you really care about a certain issue and you want to know what the city is proposing, you can look for the goal that represents the issue that you care about. Maybe you really care about the natural environment, so you can look for the goal that speaks to the environment. And then underneath that, we have short descriptions of each of the different projects that we're proposing. Or maybe you care about affordable housing and you can look at that goal, or creating a more welcoming community. So those goals really serve as a way of connecting the diversity of readers who might pick up the plan with the specific implementation measures that the city is proposing. So we have all 76 projects described in the plan. Something that your staff team and you are going to receive as a follow-up to this meeting is then a set of tables that capture projects that the project team thought were particularly important to consider for shorter-term action. So in the plan, there is no time frame associated with the 76 different projects, but we ended up selecting 34 of them that we think are good candidates for consideration for acting on in the next few years. And for each of these projects, we then have more detailed information about them. What would be the lead departments that might advance a given project? Is there an estimated cost to the project? And we give sort of a general guidance on that. What might be the funding sources to pay for it? And what are the first steps to really launching that project and getting it started? Some of the projects will be things where it's simply a matter of the city and upper management and department heads just programming this activity in next year's work plan. So there's no added money that would be needed. It's like doing some research to develop a new function. Like we have some stuff on code enforcement, and so some of those projects don't require special funding. Other projects might represent a capital investment or might represent, or might necessitate bringing in some outside expertise and assistance. And so they'd be things that either come forward as part of the annual budget process. So don't be surprised when you see your town manager and assistant town manager potentially proposing some projects and flagging along with, say, your community development director, and noting that these are things, this is a project that requires funding as part of the budget process to help implement our newly updated community plan. So all information of that nature is included in this set of short-term implementation project tables. These tables will live outside the plan. They will be something that staff maintains, because as they start scoping out these different candidates for short-term action, these different projects, they'll learn more things about how to make them work effectively in your community. And so they'll be making updates. They'll necessarily need to update these tables, and they can do it more easily if they don't have to run a plan amendment every time they just want to, change the details. Oh, we need another step in order to operationalize this particular project. So we've got a full set of projects in the plan. We've got a set of shorter term projects that are candidates for action in the near term. And that then gives you some focus on the projects to start with once you adopt the plan. Again, as mentioned, we went through a process of developing this portfolio of projects, and then we've started testing it. So we went to the Community Advisory Committee that's part of the plan process, and we invited them to pick their top project from under each of the different 10 different goals from the collection of short-term projects. So we have their preferences. We also went to the leadership team for the city. Tremendous knowledge both on your Community Advisory Committee for folks who live and work in the community, and your leadership team, folks who are managing departments or in the manager's office and the like. So they also weighed in on their top candidates for projects for short-term action. So all of that is information to help you and help the staff identify those top projects to start with, recognizing that there are many projects that will get implemented in the years ahead. All right. And then the final thing that we have in Chapter 6 is what we call operational policies. You, as the governing board of the city, have a really important role in helping to make sure that the plan is successfully implemented. Your leadership that you've provided already to date, the hosting of the different meetings that you did, even the decision to do an updated plan, were important acts of leadership that you demonstrated. And that leadership will be needed to then make the investments and provide the guidance to implement the plan successfully. So you have a really important role moving forward. Meg has talked about how you can use the plan as a touchstone for decision making. So that is something that you can reinforce, that upper management can reinforce with other departments. We know this project was led by the Community Development Department, but other departments have provided very important input on it. And it really takes the full city staff to implement a vision like what's captured in the plan. So you've got a touchstone. Staff collaboration is essential. We also, when we do a new plan, we also want to make sure that it's aligned with the other plans, or that in this case, when you do a comprehensive plan, the other plans are aligned with it. So there's an opportunity. That is one of the implementation projects we have, is taking a look at just making sure we've got consistency across our different plans. We've worked hard to try and support that, but we invariably find that there are inconsistencies between different plans in different places. Also, to help sort of track progress on implementing the plan, we strongly encourage communities to have an annual report that where the staff comes and shares what they've done over the last year to help advance the vision, the community vision represented in the plan on the ground, and then tell you what they're planning for the coming year. Okay, we accomplished these 3 projects. We've got another 4 that are on tap. We're still in the midst of a couple of projects. And this is a really good time both to get a status report from the staff on the progress of implementing the updated vision, and also to have some conversations about any course corrections that are needed or adjustments and the like. And then the staff really needs your support in investing the resources to carry out these projects to make the plan a reality. Then finally, plans, you are in a dynamic environment, as we know, with new residents coming into the community, both your community's changing, the world is changing. And so doing regular updates to the plan is an important function. We often see communities do some kind of update every 5 years, and then a more comprehensive update like what you're doing now every 10 years or so. And so that allows you to then track the evolution of your community and the evolution of the context that you're working within. So together with an implementation strategy, implementation projects, and operational policies, we are really working to set the stage for you to make a smooth transition from planning to implementation and be able to really pursue your shared community vision successfully in the years ahead. So any questions on the implementation piece of the plan? And we invite you again to look more closely at Chapter 6, and we'll also be sending staff, and they'll be sending to you this set of short tables with the short-term projects. So look for those. Okay, so from this point forward, as Lorna mentioned, we're going to be heading toward an end of May release for the draft plan. Again, this is another opportunity for stakeholders in the community to review the plan, provide their input. We've got a special sort of public comment period of about a couple of weeks. Then we have a chance to digest any additional feedback that we get from the community on the plan. And then we're into presenting to your appointed boards. A plan like this under North Carolina state law has to go to the planning board for review and recommendation, and then comes to you as the governing board for review and adoption. So we'll be visiting the planning board, talking with them, answering their questions, sharing information, hearing their comments, and then bringing the plan and any comments that the planning board has forward to you. We've then got a target date of early July for a public hearing, then another period of opportunity to make any revisions based on what we've heard, and then come to you in early August. And with that, I'd like to turn it back to you, Mayor Volk, for any questions, comments, and discussion that you have.
Okay.
And I'll invite, do y'all want to come? I'll invite Lorna and Meg to be here to help me answer any questions that you have.
Questions, comments?
So I think this is all great. It's a lot of information to digest. I'm excited to see the full plan. I'm going to try to read it all front to back, so we'll see how that goes. I have a detailed question that you can get me the answer later, but you were talking about the available properties within the city and the ETJ. It was like almost 4,000 acres. I was curious how much of that almost 4,000 acres was in the city or like if we could see that broken out, city, ETJ, I think that would be very helpful. Yes. Okay, awesome. Thank you.
Anything else?
I guess under the operational policies, where D, where you said annual progress report, the staff, I would like to see maybe the community partnerships involved in that progress report as well. And E, under the regular updates, you said we'll have a 10-year. Maybe we could address that and have a 5-year plan, because, you know, every 5 years that we revisit this instead of 10 years from now.
Anything else? I think we all have a lot of reading to do,
Summer reading.
and we do appreciate it. Thank you for this, this wrap-up as we go into the final stages here. I look forward to being able to implement this. I like the idea of the various projects, implementation projects. I think that will be very helpful as we go through. Besides the big vision that we have.
Thank you.
Well, thank you on behalf of the consultant team for having us out this afternoon.
Thanks so much for being here.
Mayor, I'm going to ask to be excused. Shelby has graduation at
Yeah.
5:30 that I need to attend.
Okay. Have fun.
These kids.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Okay, next. Thank you. We have the Historic Preservation Commission telling us what they've been doing the last year or so. Okay. Well,
I don't want to do it by
Cheryl, you
myself,
can
so.
okay.
I think Lou's got a PowerPoint, so we'll get started. While that loads up, good evening. I'm Cheryl Jones, the Chair of the Historic Preservation Commission. I think I know everyone, so thank you for having us here, for everyone for being here. As Mayor Volk mentioned, we've been busy for the last year, and so we wanted to come during Preservation Month and update you on what we've been doing and what's on our horizon, and let you meet all of our members. A few couldn't be here or had to leave, but for the ones that are here, I'll let them introduce themselves.
Okay.
I think I know a lot of you, but I'm Jim Welter.
David McKinley.
Jane Brannigan.
Ralph Hammond Green.
And Lou, do we have the PowerPoint?
There it is. On the side.
Sorry, it looks different. Okay, perfect. Oh, it's tiny. Okay, so I will start and then let you all comment as you see fit. And mainly, we'd like to field questions, give you an information that you don't have or want to have, and just give you an overview of what we do in a short period. So the Historic Preservation Commission powers, we are bound by statutes and guidelines. I'm sorry, they're standards now. I have to keep remembering that. But this is the statutory reference for what we are allowed to do under the statutes. And so we undertake an inventory of properties, historical, prehistoric, architectural, and or cultural significance. And then we have guidelines and standards that we use to make sure that those are protected. We recommend building sites, areas for designations, historic districts, or landmarks, or if they no longer fit, then there's a revocation provision in there. We have the ability to acquire property for purposes of preservation and public access. We also help with restoring, preserving, and operating historic properties in some communities. We conduct educational activities and outreach within the community, and review and act upon proposals for alterations, demolitions, or new construction within the historic district. So this is probably the process you all are most familiar with. It's our quasi-judicial with the certificates of appropriateness permits within the different districts. And so leading into that, certificates of appropriateness, We are unique in that we have a quasi-judicial proceeding, so we actually have what is similar to a court hearing or a proceeding every time where we have testimony and witnesses and then apply the standards. It was guidelines for 16 of my almost 17 years on here, so it sounds different. But the standards to make sure that what they're proposing is compatible with the standards for the historic district that they are located within. And so misconception, we don't have subjective leeway on those. That would defeat the whole purpose. So these standards are voted in and put in place, and then we are bound by those and apply those to the information presented at the hearing to determine if those standards have been met. And then if they have, the certificate of appropriateness is issued, and if they have not, then it's denied at that point. So we apply the design standards, if I've said, to modifications of construction, new construction, anything that is within a district is subject to those certificates of appropriateness. If it's minor work, staff can vote, can hear those and provide an approval or denial. And if it is of a greater impact, then it comes to us to have a quasi-judicial hearing. So, in subcommittees, I think I'm the one here from Designation Committee, but Ralph and Jim, I'll let you talk about community affairs.
I think there is another slide on. The Community Affairs Subcommittee really, major accomplishments the last year is we have gotten listed on the GIS system, whether a property is actually included in a historic district. We've gotten, I don't know if we brought any of the rack cards, Lou? Okay. But we have gotten the rack cards where we're reaching out to the local realtors in the area that can provide them with a little card showing the local historic districts and who to contact if somebody's buying a property in there about what they can and can't do. We also spend a fair amount of time with, we've tried to do the cookie caper at Christmas time, which has been a very popular item. This past year, we couldn't get the inns in a line on a date, but we're continue to work on that and look at some historic property tours, spring tours, hopefully next year. And I might let Ralph, you want to talk a little bit about our coloring book project?
This year, we decided to resume a project that had been taking place for several years. I don't know exactly when it was originally implemented. Originally, we were doing coloring books for the 4th grade. And after review of that by some teachers and comparison with the state standards for the curriculum, we found that they're best aimed at the 3rd grade. And so this year, I contacted all of the schools in Henderson County, and all of them wished to participate. We had 1,000 new coloring books printed, and they were distributed last week to the schools. And we'll solicit feedback from the schools and see how they went. We do have some thoughts on future additions to this project, and we'll be working on that as among our future things.
A couple of the other things that we have tackled as a commission since COVID is basically catching up in the sense that we've had to replace banners that have been damaged and knocked down. We've reached out with Blue Ridge Community College Preservation Week that they held earlier in the month. And it's been a process where we now have pretty much a full commission, and we are charging ahead on trying to replace things that have gone by the wayside with COVID and look at new and different things that we can do. I think one of the things that we do need your continued support on, and maybe a little bit more increasing, is those people that know me is I love to follow the rules, and a lot of people don't. So we do need some, the normal follow-up because the certificate of appropriateness is a quasi-judicial code enforcement issue. So that's something that we all need to keep in front of us with the commission going forward, so.
Do you speak on that? Okay. I'll go back for just a moment. So the next one that is a large part of what we do is the designation committee. And so that's something that we've been in front of you all before. The mill district, or the mill that we did on Grove, and questions that arose on that, and then trying to find local buildings, cultural sites that are important, because a lot of times we don't know if no one tells us. And so we are trying to reach out to more diverse groups. Crystal Colley, who was here earlier, we've had some discussions. She's on that committee with myself to try and figure out, how do we tap into more minority communities, because we don't have a lot of the written history for those. And so on top of trying to find new landmarks or sites for designation, or at least local highlights, we've tried to look deeper into, especially at the African American community and Black community, to figure out some neighborhoods that might have been there in the past that we have pieces of. And so Ms. Lawrence and the Landina Guest House is kind of what tipped that off. But Crystal and I have worked on, there's 5 different neighborhoods that have been identified. And so we're starting that process of trying to really focus in on those. But then also, areas that may be in the ETJ that have kind of gone unnoticed that we didn't know about before. So as the trends continue to evolve and we learn about new properties, we're focusing on those and trying to isolate a few that we could focus on each year. And trying to get those at landmark status or on the state sides or on national register or whatever the level of recognition is that they desire. Design Guidelines Committee, Design Standards Committee, this is one that we've recently appointed for. And so just like you all are doing your comprehensive plan, we are revisiting all of our standards and trying to figure out what needs to change. Artificial materials policies has become a hot button topic. Wood windows are the ones we hear about all the time, and what can be put in place there. Doors are different now, all kinds of different things that we're trying to keep up with the times and figure out what's historically compatible nationally as well as in the state, but still fits and honors what was traditional materials and how we find a compromise on those. So that is a committee that was kind of tabled during COVID and has now come back up, and we're working with staff and some other communities to figure out what they've done. So as not to have to reinvent the wheel and find out what's working well in other places and how can we make it our own for this area and stay within statutory rules. So the other one is what's called DRAC, or the Design Review Advisory Committee. That is an advisory group that they have the ability to assemble and hear the hear from the applicant, review their plans ahead of time. They're typically architecturally equipped and experienced so that they can give us some comments and feedback on those. They're not binding, but it sure is helpful if you have someone who knows the difference between a mutton and a sash and what have you, and the distinctions to tell us, yes, this was compatible in 1920, or no, it wasn't. So they are a good resource for us and for the applicants. Do you want to say anything? Okay. Interrupt me because I'll talk. So, project updates, I'll start these, and then different ones of us have worked on different projects. So first and foremost, we want to say thank you to City Council. You all have been just amazingly supportive to us over the years, and we are so appreciative. I hope that you look out and see things that we've done that make you proud and make the city better. And we appreciate you standing with us and being behind us and the funding that you give us, but just the support in general. So just a big thank you for everything that you do, because that's what makes these possible. So, and they talked about in the comp plan, what's your passion? What do you love to see about the city of Hendersonville? And I get excited when I see older buildings that are being repurposed, refurbished, and can be used for a new purpose. And I think we all have that same common thread. So that's what we work towards with this. So thank you. Lennox Park is the newest local landmark designation project that we're working on. This is across Wooded Street, where there used to be the spring that was down there and that whole little district. And there's some really neat history on it. So we are starting the process of potentially making that into a local landmark designation, and then all the great things in the public access that will go along with it and the educational components. So I think that has recently been submitted for the designation report to be reviewed. So hopefully within maybe the next 30 to 60 days, we'll get some feedback and decide what comes next there. The banner replacement Jim talked about. There are banners within each district to represent them and acknowledge them. And you can see them on this over here. And then the local outreach, the Blue Ridge Community College Gathering, that was a local and community-wide event where they brought in historic and community, I don't even know exactly how to describe it, but a whole gamut of the kind of the patchwork of the community to have a day that they could come in and the public could visit and they could share the history of the county and the city. Coloring book distribution, rack cards, downtown 7th Avenue partnerships. We did have meetings with downtown and 7th Avenue. We haven't had one in a while, but we do collaborate with them to try and figure out what makes sense. How do we work together to fulfill each other's plans and find projects that work together and help complement one another. The Landina Guest House we introduced earlier, so thank you for that. It was a really, really neat project to be involved in, and the things that you found in there were amazing. So we still talk about how neat it was to see the bills and what the programming was, and the dinners were amazing. So that's where we'll appreciate that. The Buffalo Soldier Project, that's an ongoing partnership that we have with the county and some other local organizations. We have a Buffalo Soldier who was buried in Oakdale Cemetery. And so we are in the process of figuring out how to get the bronze plaque on the road with very limited number of words, with the whole big story. So that's our new challenge. So those will be up hopefully shortly. They are in the process. We are fine tuning, I think, what's going to go on there, and then hopefully move forward with that and get it going. But it's been a really neat project. I've learned a lot. With what the significance and the contribution of that and what we have in our local midst that we sometimes don't even realize. So that is one that we'll be moving forward. Will be a good chance for us to get people informed as to the 9th Avenue School that was over there, and that portion of the cemetery is close to the elementary school and middle school, so we can have people come up and visit and do stories and, you know, the history and background, but then also we have a project going at Oakdale with the Roundhouse and trying to get some educational components over there and get people more, you know, walking tours, things they can do on their own within Oakdale and all the amazing things that are housed in that area. So the other project that happened that we actually can't take credit for, but we're sure happy it did. Rudy's downtown. We did not know that UNC Greensboro had an historic architectural I guess it's a certificate add-on to one of their programs is the best way to say it. And so lo and behold, Rudy's group was in front of us for a COA, and we didn't know what was under the awning and the facade, but we knew it was not original. And so we heard testimony and statements that there's nothing up there. We don't know where the original Queen facade that was up there when it was the cinema went. And then UNCG got involved and figured out a way to make this possible. And if you walk Main Street, you will see the facade that's been restored, and it is stunning. I mean, it's absolutely stunning. So that's one of those feel-good projects that you are fortuitously blessed with for what comes out of a little bit of extra work. So it was a really neat collaboration with them and ongoing collaboration that they have some availability to help other property owners that now we know a new resource. And if any of y'all want to talk, I'll be quiet. So. If you want to go ahead. The Oakdale Cemetery, it's the new one on there. The other two are duplicates. But.
Right. Well, the Oakdale Cemetery Roundhouse has been a discussion for the last couple months, getting some possibly, one of the ways that we've thought of to inform the public and save some money are some of these storyboards that we could put around in the Roundhouse or on the outside, and even in some of the Brooklyn subdivisions. We can tell a story, even some of the verbal stories that have been handed down over time. That is an educational process that would add to some of the walking tours. Public Works has been really taking some of the lead in what the Roundhouse repair needs to be. Because, I mean, if we're going to do this and they want to repair it, it'd be a nice thing that we could use again. And there's apparently there's some nice stained glass inside there that would be nice to preserve. So we already talked about the Buffalo Soldier project. And the Roundhouse would be a nice addition to the whole Oakdale Cemetery. If you've ever been on one of the tours of Oakdale, would be a good thing. We did the design review standards, basically.
The property condition inventory is the next one.
Yeah, okay.
That's yours.
Okay. One of the things that the commission, since we are chartered by the state, and well, by you all and the state guidelines, we have not really updated our inventory of historic properties and their conditions since the inception of some of the historic districts. And that is a requirement from the state to keep up for us to review the local districts, look at properties that need attention from the homeowners, or either expand some of the properties because of the districts at that time, when they were developed back in 1999, there are some structures that may qualify for historic representation and could be added to our current districts. So that'll be a not inexpensive item going forward, which is probably something more of a multi-year project because it's something you don't want to launch into right away. But it is a required maintenance for the local historic districts so that all the district homeowners can maintain their property and their tax credits for their renovations.
It also helps as a preventive so that we don't run into demolition by neglect, which is a major issue.
So, and we touched on the African cultural historical sites. So, questions?
Questions?
I don't have any questions. I'd just like to thank the committee for recognizing the Landinas. And there are certain areas in Peacock Town, Black Bottom, West End, Brooklyn, that no longer there, but if you feel free to contact me and I can tell you the historical value of those, like where the YMC's at, that was the Black Elks Club. One of the homes across from the junior high school was the Black American Legion.
Okay.
So,
And those are things that are great for storyboards,
yeah.
recognition, local plaques, and we need to get those on. We have this little walking tour of downtown Hendersonville. We can add some of those to a walking tour or a map of historic places in Hendersonville.
Right, and the vacant property on the corner of, what's that? What do they call that, Prince Street, where the Buffalo Soldier, anyway, it's vacant. That was where the Sixth Avenue School was at, not Ninth Avenue. Ninth Avenue is where the present junior high, but that was the whole Sixth Avenue School site.
And one of the nice things is that we have you as a connection point. A lot of history that we miss is oral history. And we did the Berkeley Park Day where we had several people come out and they shared, the stories of what it was like for them playing ball there, going to games, doing picnics. And so we put together a DVD for that was there for posterity. So one thing we would like to do, and Crystal's kind of taking the lead on this, is sort of to figure out how we have these discussions. How do we find the community members who are still here or have connections outside who can help us get some of those stories? And then how do we memorialize them? So that's the goal. And the beauty of these storyboards is they're dynamic and we're not restricted to certain size. I mean, obviously within reason, but we can change things out. So if we learn new information or if we want to highlight something different, we can do it and it doesn't have the same level of scrutiny as a local landmark or something that has a higher caliber. So we can highlight things that maybe don't that the structure's not there, but the cultural significance is there.
And as I stated before, just call me.
But one of the things that we're learning that's a good access point for a lot of these oral histories is, quite honestly, not exactly one of my favorite ways of communicating, but these QR codes that you can actually put on, like the roundhouse and all the things that could go to the HPC website with a more detailed story than we can actually fit on a storyboard. So
You could get real crazy and have some of the oral histories recorded in videos, and they could live on the HPC site, and so the QR code could go to those.
Yep.
That would be cool.
And so, yeah, I mean, we have.
Yeah, I think Ronnie Pepper's working on that because I was one of the ones that interviewed. So, continue to work with Ronnie. Because we're doing that with interviewing some of us seasoned natives.
Very kindly, yes.
And I have one other question. Can I get a coloring book if there are extra ones? Okay.
Are there extra ones? Okay.
Thank
I
you.
know my daughter's in third grade and her school decided to save no next year until they do local government. She's so bummed because
Oh, no. We'll get her one.
I think I know somebody.
Yeah.
And if any ideas come up during the comp discussions or just in general, I mean, please let us know because you never know where these great ideas are going to come from. So we love doing the community outreach. We got cut off for a few years with COVID, but like our last big one was the party in the park, and we did a big bash for Berkeley. Susan Freddie was here. She organized all of that for us, and it was amazing. So we would love the Landina Guest House. We had a big street party that day in recognition, and it was so nice to hear people say, I've been out in the street for a good reason in a long time. So I think just having people out and getting together is how that community gets built, and that's super important to what we do. And the enforcement's one thing, but being in the community that you help protect and serve is what really matters to us. So.
Because I think one of the big things that I've learned on the whole commission here is everybody that's on this commission actually wants to help people. It's not, we don't want to look like we're cops, but we want to help them understand. Some people take a little bit longer to understand than others.
Thank you.
Well, it is,
See a little more integration between the other boards that report to council, such as the planning board, the tree board. One of our requirements, for instance, is if a tree dies and it needs to be removed, it must be replaced. Well, it would help if there was more cross-pollination, so to speak, between the tree board and our board.
We can work on that.
well, just going through this Gen H process, one of the big bullet points is community character. And that's what you're doing. You're keeping that character of the community that would otherwise be replaced. So we thank you for everything you're doing on this. It'll help remind us of our history. Thank you.
Thank you all for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
What? What? Right, well, we are at the end of our agenda. Unless you guys have anything more you want to say,
No.
then
She's
we're
just talking
adjourned.
about hair rollers.